All right, Panther Lair, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Panthers ball screen defense against the Virginia Tech Hokies this past Saturday. Now, this is something that I thought Virginia Tech executed pretty well. Had some of their key players not gotten into foul trouble, I think the game could have been a lot closer, especially down the stretch. So we're going to look at 7 sequences here. I'm going to talk about why these were successful, why the Panthers struggled here a little bit. I think kind of that's one and the same, but we're not going to waste any more time here. Let's dive in. So this first one is going to be out of transition, just a few minutes into the after the opening tip here. So coming out of transition, and you're going to see this ghost screen here set by Poteet, and Federico is going to be in drop coverage. So there's the ghost. Now we see the roll. Now, one of the things about drop coverage, because I've talked about it a lot, I've talked a lot about it when it comes to how good Jalen Lowe has been against it. One of the things that makes drop coverage popular is it doesn't really require, or as much requirement of help defenders, because essentially what you're trying to do is when you establish this drop point, you're inviting, provided that the ball handler's defender gets over the screen fast enough, you're inviting like a mid-range jump shot. Now, essentially, you're not going to be able to challenge any shot until you've kind of completely sunk back here around the restricted area or in the paint, and you have to like backpedal at the same rate in which the man that you may have defended is rolling, right? So you're trying to take away pocket passes, you're trying to roll at the same depth here, you're going to be able to challenge at the rim, but you're essentially hoping that this defender gets over fast enough to challenge a shot, but if you force this guy to take a long two, win, and all the other defenders do not have to be in help as long. So this is why this is a popular defense. This is why it's really popular at the NBA, because, you know, there's just so much spacing and good shooting that, you know, leaving people for any amount of time is usually dangerous at the highest level. So you see drop coverage far more in the NBA than you do see showing or hedging, but obviously you see that at lower levels. So with that, quick breakdown here of why drop coverage is played. Dive in here. Now you see Federico is starting his back pedal, but he's basically kind of lost at this point. Like, this is a tough angle for him. You can see he's not super balanced. If a pass goes through in here, maybe Hinson tags, but this is probably a dunk. You'll see why that works out later for Virginia Tech as well. But because he's unable to back pedal fast enough, and Bub only ends up being on Padula's hip most of the time here, this ends up just being a shot at the rim. So that will be the first weekend, so that's going to be drop in transition. Now, these next 2 sequences also kind of, I think the responsibility falls a little bit on the ball handler's defender in not getting over fast enough, and one of the reasons is because Virginia Tech loves to run a lot of motion going into their ball screens. So this is not a situation where the guard or the ball handler backs all the way up, calls for a screen, and then initiates action. A lot of time they're coming off of another off-ball screen. They're trying to curl around the player on a DHO situation to initiate their screens, and that puts the ball handler's defender in a trailing position. You saw that a little bit here on the last sequence. You're going to see it on these next 2 sequences here as well. So you'll see this is going to turn into a curl here. So Padula is going to curl this around the baseline, but he's in motion. This is going to put Lowe on his back hip or pretty much behind him the entire time. Now, what could happen here and what they end up executing is like one of those peel switches I talked about before. So Lowe peels off and defends Hinson's man, but Hinson never fully commits to defending Padula. Guillermo Diaz-Graham comes off here, but never quite gets a great challenge at the rim. So there's a little bit of miscommunication, but you can see that what Virginia Tech is trying to do is create the separation between the ball handler's defender and the ball handler. And they did a pretty good job of that. So same thing here. Here comes the screen. Now this is going to be a flipped angle screen. So Padula is going to wrap around here. This is going to look a little bit like zoom, but the minute that Poteet hands off the ball, he's going to flip the angle of this screen, and it changes the way Ishmael Leggett has to defend it. So you'll see the immediate flip. So now the ball screen is, while this could have been a hard show here, now this is going to be, or just rather not really a show, but like jumping out, I guess, for terminology's sake. And now Padula is going to get going this way with Ishmael Leggett having to trail. And Federico, I think for the most part, because he's trying to allow the gap here for Leggett to go through, he's not necessarily in drop, but he's certainly not up to touch, and he just kind of gets caught in this like no man's land of defense. And because Leggett never gets over to contest, best thing Federico can do is continue to like shrink back to try to take away lobs over the top, but he never gets into a great position to contest this either, and it ends up being just a floater by Padula, a tough shot. Okay, so here you see they moved another, wrapping around here to try to move into the screen. This is going to be a show. So with Hunter Couture, you want to meet him at the screen to show. Like, you don't want him to step in and shoot a 3-pointer. That would have been the same for Padula as well. So now you have a situation where Federico's trying to show, but he just kind of waves his hand here and then retreats at the last minute. So I just think this was a situation where they wanted to show here, but because of this action, it made the show less effective. And what ends up happening here is just a kind of a quick pass here on a short roll. Hinson's lifting to recover back to his man, and Federico, just not the beefiest guy, unable to contest Petit effectively at the rim. So here we go, another screen. This is going to be a quick slip on that screen, and you do see here, Guillermo is in drop. So what should happen here is there's not going to be as much help as you think, although Hinson is going to tag here on the rolling Petit. But again, the point of this is so these defenders do not have to be in help as long as with hedging or showing, but Guillermo needs to shrink back at the same rate in which Petit rolls so that he could take away potential pocket passes and so forth. Zach Austin has to fight over to contest shots over the top, which he was very effective in doing on Saturday, and Guillermo's only going to be able to meet a shot at the rim here. So you're hoping, ideally, MJ Collins just shoots here somewhere in here, but instead what you see is that pocket pass effective because Guillermo gets caught flat-footed. There we go. More of that motion, the same. So this is creating an empty side ball screen situation. They kind of roll into this dribble, like this handoff situation. So he curls around the screen here, receives the pass. And now you have Couture trying to get downhill against Guillermo in drop coverage again, and Carrington very much trailing here. So this is a tough situation because of how far away this drop point is. So one of the things that's tough here is I think that maybe Guillermo is trying to scout out a different action. So he chooses this sag off of Petit, but I mean, meeting Couture here is pretty important, just giving his shooting prowess. So now he's kind of caught in a weird position where I think his drop point is just too deep. There's not going to be a lot of help here because of look at where Petit is rolling from. So this empty side ball screen is giving Pitt a lot of problems. But Guillermo retreats and actually is able to meet the shot at the rim. So while that drop point allows that pocket pass, that kind of just like one-handed pass into Petit, Guillermo gets back fast enough to contest, but he's just not going to be able to contend with the size there, and ends up conceding layups. So last one here, this is going to be another demonstration of show. So here we go. They're going to move into that motion to get into their ball screen situations. And Lowe's going to do a great job fighting over here, but for some reason, Guillermo's going to show. I think this is a pretty tough scout because MJ Collins is shooting like 23.4% on three-pointers here on the season. So meeting him at the screen, at the level of the screen is not great. Plus, Lowe does a really good job with the screen now. But what this opens up in this little crevice here, and this ends up being a good pass, is a short roll into Petit, who then just jams it at the rim. But I think this was kind of a miscommunication and not the best scout to meet a 23% three-point shooter there at the three-point line. So overall, I mean, Pitt won the game clearly, and a lot of that was, I think they took advantage of foul trouble, which, hey, good teams are going to be able to do that, and I think Pitt's a pretty good team. But you can kind of see the miscommunication on a couple ball screens. The ball handler's defender really just didn't do a great job getting over those screens, but a lot of it is because Virginia Tech, used motion to get into their screen, so they were never at a standstill and initiated a lot of stuff off ball screens, at least not in the, a lot of the baskets that they were successful in converting. Most of the time, they used handoffs in which, the ball handler was going to become the ball handler, used a lot of momentum going into receiving the ball, and that forced his defender to be on his hip, and it really put a lot of pressure then on the screener's defender. So something I think to watch out for. Not everybody does this, but again, when these things jump out on tape as much as they have, you could certainly see why an opponent would try to replicate this. Really wanted to break down, I think, some reasons why also teams get into certain ball screen coverages as well with this video. So hopefully it's helpful for you guys, and we'll just see you on the next one.